All right, so in this video, I am going to briefly give you an introduction, an overview to the local politics module that you're about to complete. So for the majority of this course, we've focused on the federal government. The federal government consists of our three branches of government and all of the bureaucracy that sits under those three branches. So this includes things like the House of Representatives, the military, which is under the Department of Defense, which is underneath the executive branch or the president, the Supreme Court. When we went over civil rights and civil liberties, you learned a lot about various Supreme Court cases that had important implications for the way in which we interpret things like the right to privacy or civil rights issues, the Equal Protection Clause, so on and so forth. But in this module, we're going to focus on things that happen, right? The politics of local and city government. Now remember, the United States government is hierarchical. Technically, the federal government has supremacy over state and local governments. But because we live in a country that uses a federal system in which powers, roles, and responsibilities are kind of divided or divvied out between the federal government and state and local government, because of that, our local governments, they make really important decisions. They have a lot of power, a lot of influence over our lives and our quality of life. Okay, so local government is in charge of public safety, for instance. The local police department or your sheriff's department, that is under the auspices of your local government. In addition to that, the coronavirus pandemic, right? In the coronavirus pandemic, it's mostly been city and county and state government that is responsible for running testing centers, making sure hospitals have enough resources and supplies. It's the state and county that have instituted policies like the stay-at-home orders or the requirement that everybody should have to wear a face mask when going out in public, so on and so forth. Okay. In this module, though, what I really want to focus in on is a particular issue at the local level that is important to all of our lives here as residents of the Inland Empire. And that issue is the enormous amount of warehouses and logistics centers. In the reading that you're going to get to later on in this module, you're going to learn in particular about one warehouse or logistics center. It's called the World Logistics Center. I know, what an incredible title, or what an incredible thing to name a World Logistics Center. Or in particular, this logistics center is supposed to be the largest logistics center or warehouse system ever built. Now, the reason that you see here in this PowerPoint slide that the picture is animated, it's drawn up, it's not an actual picture of the World Logistics Center, is because the World Logistics Center doesn't exist yet. It's in the planning phase and has not been built yet. Okay, but here are some key facts that you need to know about the World Logistics Center. It's supposed to be built in Moreno Valley. The Moreno Valley City Council approved the center by only a 3-2 vote in 2015. This was a really controversial decision. There are a lot of people that think that this warehouse, this logistics center, is a bad idea, which I'll get to in a second. If it is successfully built, it's going to be the size of 700 football fields. That's insane. In addition to that, it's supposedly going to add 20,000 jobs and add $2.5 million to the local economy each year. Lastly, though, there are a lot of very wealthy people that have spent a lot of money on paying for particular individuals to run for city council in Moreno Valley. Why does this matter? Well, because construction projects have to be approved by local city councils. So the company that is building the World Logistics Center wants people to sit on Moreno Valley's city council that are in support of building the logistics center and warehouse. Whether or not that's democratic, whether or not the logistics center or warehouse is a good thing for the people of Moreno Valley or people that live in the Inland Empire, I'll leave that question up to you guys. I'm not going to tell you what I think, although you might be able to guess. But that's what I want you to think about in this module and in writing your reading response. The question effectively is, should we say yes or say no to logistics centers and warehouses? One could argue that logistics centers are good for local governments and the civilian population, the people that live in the surrounding area. That's because if a really wealthy company like Amazon builds a warehouse or a logistics center, well, there are going to be a bunch of jobs created out of that might be good for the economy and quality of life that people, for people that live around in the area. But in addition to that, these big corporations, they oftentimes have to pay property taxes to cities in which they have their logistics center or warehouse. So that might mean more money for parks, more money to fix the roads, more money for the public school system, right? So on and so forth. However, there are a lot of people that argue that logistics centers and warehouses are not really worth it. They're a bad idea. They're a terrible idea. Specifically, the article that you read by Kamal is going to argue that logistics centers and warehouses lead to really, really poor air quality. And sometimes babies are born with birth defects because of how severely poor the air quality is, right? In addition to that, this cheap access to consumer goods, it's not even good for workers, right? The working conditions in Amazon warehouses and logistics centers is not good. These are temporary jobs. They are not long-term, and they don't pay fair and good wages, right? So these are all of the questions that I want you to be asking yourself as you are walking through these readings. What is the trade-off? Is it important that we have all these logistics and centers and warehouses and we're willing to pay the price? The environment may have to suffer. At the end of the day, we all want access to cheap consumer goods, right? Many of us have Amazon Prime accounts ourselves. Or is it not worth it? Are we willing to forego that tax revenue in order to ensure that people are healthy, that people have clean air to breathe, in order to ensure that, I don't know, some local bird species does not go extinct because they didn't cut down all the trees. These birds still have a habitat, a place to live. Lastly, though, what I want to point out more than anything out of all this is the reason I assigned this to you guys is because I want you to finish my class with a sense of civic responsibility. But in addition to that, I want you to have a sense of empowerment. So if you think that logistics centers and warehouses are overrunning the Inland Empire and they're leading to a poor quality of life, what I hope is you will pay better attention to local city politics and particularly elections. If you live in Moreno Valley, it's your city council representatives that are in charge of determining whether or not these logistics centers and warehouses are going to be built. So you should probably keep up with who your city council representatives are, who is financing their campaigns, and what their positions are on warehouses and logistics centers. Lastly, though, Many people tell me that they don't vote because they feel like their vote doesn't matter, that whoever is running for president and representing the Democratic Party, they're going to win California. So therefore, there's no point in turning out to elections. However, your vote really does count. It really does matter when it comes down to local level politics. So right here, I have some election numbers, some data from the election for city council on June 20th in 2019. So not too long ago. And in this election, half of all of the city council seats in the city of Riverside were up for re-election. What I want to point out to you is just how few people voted in this election. So in Ward 1, this consists of downtown Riverside and the Wood Streets. You'll notice that only 5,000 people voted in this election, right? Aaron Edwards won by only about 200, 300 votes. Same thing for Ward 3, right? Ronaldo Fierro, who is the city council representative for Ward 3 now, he beat Warren Avery by only 100 votes. That's it. So whether or not you turn out to these elections, this matters. And this will inevitably, right, be an important factor in deciding, what your community looks like, how many parks you have versus how many warehouses and logistics centers you have. Okay, so let me know if you guys have any questions about your reading responses or anything else in this video.